All right, we're back on our crappy, crappy headset or crappy microphone thing. This is the Stream of Conscious podcast, going full artistic. Uh, it's pouring down rain again, but at least it's not windy. It was a nice morning, and I saw the neighbors getting stuff done, and then it just swooped on in, and it's supposed to be nasty for a day or so. Then it'll be okay again. Uh, and then those will be the last handful of days until it goes full on. So, as always, from now on, I don't have particular points that I'm trying to make, or even overarching themes. I'm just getting everything out, I guess. And if you decide to listen, then great. And if you don't decide to listen, then there's only like 5 of you that listen to this. So, um, and no, I think in no particular order, I want to go over the kind of the recap of the year with the garden thing, because I think I've deleted most of the podcasts where I talk about how I did with how my gardening after action report. So the potatoes did fine, as I knew they would. The strawberries got off to a really rough start, contending with everything that loves to eat strawberries, and the strawberry plants was a real challenge, but I eventually figured it out through various amounts of fencing that let the strawberries get established. Um, Thankfully, the deer only like to eat the tips off, the girl deer. Um, but that's still not enough to where they'll get established. And they do the same thing to huckleberries. I noticed they did the same thing to blueberries. Um, the last people that lived here planted a bunch of blueberries outside the wire because they were not smart. They made a lot of mistakes. That was one of them. And while the deer wouldn't kill the blueberries, they eat the tips off. So the blueberries are like perpetually in like year one, which means they never grow at all and they never produce. You're just watering them, I guess, for the lulls. I'm not going to fence those off. They're just gonna sit there, I guess, because I don't know necessarily what to do with them. Um, I don't want to really like expend any more energy. Um, I'll maintain them, but it's just like more fencing and more fencing and more fencing. I could transplant them. That's not a bad idea. But I don't know how long they've been in there. I feel like they've only been in there a year, but I think it's actually 2 years based on some comments that the guy had made before he sold us the place. Um, could transplant them. That's not too sketchy. Maybe that'll be like a maybe that'll be like a winter thing. If there's like a really nice day, I could try to dig those out and see if I could get them in the covered. I don't know. That's a freaking hell of a lot of work, though. I mean, I was just telling somebody, blueberry blueberry plants are one of the most affordable plants on the planet because they're, well, at least here in the Pacific Northwest, because they're mass. The sale of blueberry bushes is massively oversaturated, and they don't ever. I've never seen all the blueberry bushes sell, so you can practically go anywhere and find them. at whatever price you want, from spring all the way through to fall. So, I could just buy more for like $1 a piece. I mean, they're like really really affordable. I'll put this phone somewhere where I can see how it's doing. I gotta When I do these podcasts, I gotta take these off the 5 minute timer. I gotta take my phone off the 5 minute timer. Anyway, so that's blueberries, strawberries, potatoes. I gotta get the rest of the potatoes out. I hadn't factored in where the heck you're going to put all of your potatoes. I feel, I don't know, they take up a lot of space, and you don't want to stack them too heavy. Um, they'll be okay in this rain. I mean, if some of them turned to mush, then they were damaged anyway, and I gotta leave them out there. So now that it's overcast, they're kind of safer. But the thing is they're all still growing. Uh, batch number 2, because I got a double crop of potatoes this year. Um, they're still out there growing. It hasn't been cold enough to kill them all, and they still have a lot of energy. So those could be going for like several more weeks. There isn't going to be a cold snap, I think, until Tuesday. So what else is there? The corn, I only got 3 teeny tiny little corn pods, but that's enough to dry them out and make more corn for next year. The kale did really good, but that was a distractionary measure. The carrots did crap. The peas, I tried tons of carrots, and only like 5 grew, and I'm just going to leave them there. Carrots you can leave. The peppers didn't really get big enough to do much of anything, and we kind of weren't in the mood to eat them because there wasn't really anything to eat them with, because we didn't quite get enough tomatoes. The tomatoes did what I would consider okay. If I was going to give the tomatoes a score, I would give them like a solid, B if it was like a letter grade. What would have elevated them to like an A or an A plus is if I had actually put them where they would have got a little more sun. But I think the tomatoes got effed up for like 3 reasons. I think they didn't get enough water, and then it would rain or whatever, or it would be humid, and then they wouldn't dry out all the way. Like, tomatoes are really weird. They need a lot of water, but they need to like dry out. So you really should just be watering the roots. But if the soil doesn't drain too much, then they get waterlogged, and if it drains too much, then you're just endlessly watering them. It's like really weird. It's really 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 weird. But we still got a lot of tomatoes. But now that it's raining, I think they're not going to dry out and they're going to get soggy. We also got a ton of tomatoes where they split, and so I think we just weren't quite picking them. Sometimes we weren't picking them up fast enough. So you got to really stay on your tomato game. So we were never getting quite enough to preserve, which is what the peppers were for. They were to be preserved with the tomatoes. We never quite got enough to preserve, but we got enough to eat. So we had like tomatoes on stuff like every night, which was so good. The zucchini, something ate the tips off the zucchini, but they weren't doing that good. The cucumbers didn't develop right. And I think part of that was I wasn't pruning off all of the offshoots, because I didn't understand that like there's kind of offshoots of the cucumbers, and then the main stem doesn't get all the energy that it needs. but they still did okay. I would give them like a a C for effort. Like we definitely had cucumbers, they just didn't quite turn out right. The zucchini would have been okay if same thing. I didn't prune the zucchini right, and then stuff came and ate them anyway. Um, I think there was like a couple possums that came through one night, and then decided to stuff their little possum faces because I couldn't tell what on earth they were, but they didn't move. They didn't move like rabbits. They didn't move like cats, and they didn't move like raccoons. I think anyway. Um, they moved around like little roly polies. So I think they were possums. Um, the huckleberries got fried, absolutely fried. The elderberries got one of them almost didn't make it, but I repotted them and they did great. But neither huckleberry produced. I mean, elderberry. Neither elderberry produced this year. They're supposed to produce every year if you prune them, and I did, but these didn't. So maybe they were just being spazzes, but they're in the ground now. So next year they should be huge. You really have to prune your elderberries, or they will get out of control. They're really designed to be out in the forest with lots of big critters. Excuse me, wanting to eat them. So those are okay. They aren't like wild huckleberries that'll. Oh, come on. They aren't like wild huckleberries or blueberries where they just won't get bigger. Like elderberries will do fine. So, man, excuse me. Um, so the peppers, I give the peppers like a C, but like I'm gonna try to winter the peppers. I think somehow. I don't know how I'm gonna do that yet. I might just build a little hood, a little. I might build a little deal for them. I'm not sure yet. Or I might dig them up and stick them in a little greenhouse thingy. I'm not sure yet. I'm gonna look for some suggestions on that on the internet. Um, tried two different types of strawberries. They both did okay once I got things to stop eating them. Um, the peas did okay at first, and then just got soggy and turned to mush. I think they weren't drying out enough because they weren't in direct sunlight, so they weren't drying out enough. And I think there was a couple humid days that turned them into mush. Um, three pear trees didn't produce more than maybe 3 or 4 pears between all of them. I think the freeze thaw cycles in the multiple false starts in April ruined any chance of a pear crop this year. The apple crop did amazing, and I would also note preserving pears because pears are pear shaped, as the saying goes. Not easy to preserve pears. Uh, Monumental extra work than preserving apples that are a very uniform, convenient apple shape. So if I was to rewind 60 years and go back in time and plant a bunch of stuff, as much as I love certain pears just taste like absolutely amazing, I just pears are like infinite amount of work more than like apples are. I would much rather have apple trees, despite pears being absolutely delicious. Just because apples are way more convenient. Um, yeah, but we got like 2.5 or 3.5 really big things of apples, unfortunately, like right there at the end in like September, the apples went bad really fast. Um, some bugs got to. We should have had like I think 4 apple crops, and the bugs like wiped out the fourth. So that was kind of a real bummer. Um, I was looking forward to that final apple crop. Um, so yeah, what else? Had a couple cherries already. Um, because one of the cherry trees we bought had been bought from some dude on the side of the road. It was super root bound. We put that thing in the ground and it went nuts. So I think we lucked out and got a much older tree that nobody had wanted, and I think who like they had just been putting dirt on top of it over and over and over again, and which you're not supposed to do. And they need to be down. Trees need to be down to the crown uh, to be healthy. So, um, I unwound it, put it in the ground, fertilized the heck out of it, and that thing went nuts. I think it was a much, much, much more mature tree. But I think even better than that, the branches were as mature as the trunk was. There wasn't like a big mismatch in age. Whereas like with the other one that we bought, there was like a mismatch in age. I think the root was several years older than the grafts. And despite my best efforts, like that thing had a blowout. And then my friend told me that a deer was going to sneak under it, and I didn't disagree with him. I didn't get to it as fast as I wanted. We were still really short on materials, and a deer did sneak under there and nibbled some of the bottom stuff. And then some bug came and got like the top part, um, or yeah, something, because the deer nibbled all the bottom leaves, and then something killed off all the top leaves. And that was after it had an age mismatch blowout. Um, I still firmly believe these like 5 apple trees are a scam, um, because I think a lot of the people that graft these don't know what they're doing, and they graft way too young of branches on way too old of trunks. Because if you really had like no life, you can just sit there, and as long as the trunk is still alive, you could just keep chopping branches off and just regrafting them onto other trunks over and over and over and over again. um, on the one hand, that's like, yay, good for you. But on the other hand, like, I'm not convinced necessarily that those trees are that strong and that robust and that hardy. I would just so much rather have one apple tree that's like really strong, instead of like people grafting, a year one tiny branch onto like a year 3 or 4 trunk that they've tried grafting onto over and over again, and finally they get one branch, and by then the trunk is like way older than the branch and it blows it out. Like, I don't know how you're supposed to like survive necessarily, like shit hits the fan, when you can't really trust how strong, and I guess not only strong but just how resilient they're going to be. Like, I've had a lot of different friends tell me like whether or not suckers can turn into new trees or not. And if you've been following along for a long time, I didn't have enough resources to defend all the trees when I moved in here. We didn't get to move in right away because the people that sold us this place were being doo-doo heads. And so the deer nibbled down all the trees, and then the elk basically killed all the trees. Well, since then, they've all come back as suckers, and I accidentally killed the suckers on one of them, but they weren't really getting that strong anyway. The suckers on all the rest of them got pretty strong, but I still like the deer come after them like crazy. And then they'll even eat the suckers down. The good news is like those trunks are still intact and building and generating energy. They're just not really getting the sunlight on the leaves that they need to produce anything, but you can just keep fertilizing them and they'll get stronger and stronger. So one of my friends said those will never produce again. Another one of my friends said those will turn into new trees. And besides the one I've killed, the suckers I killed, they've all come back. So like that's what you want. You want a really nice, resilient, single variety tree. Something that's gonna be tough for you, not these little boutique $175, 7 different apples where if something sneezes on one of the branches, it's toast, and then it won't have any of the little new growth things pop out of it and come up with the new leader branch. Like the amount, I didn't put any of this in bunker codes. But like just in just in trees alone, the amount, like fruit trees, the amount of stuff that you have to like learn to like properly prune it, properly maintain it, make sure you don't get hundreds of suckers, because like some idiots came through and quote unquote like topped all of the pear trees. Well, they like hedges trimmed the top of them, which made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of suckers, which means the pear tree like stops everything it's doing, thinks something horrible happened, and it starts working on its suckers, and you have to wait for the suckers to get heavy enough to flop back down. And then when they flop back down, they'll start producing off those again. But it takes forever for that to happen. And whoever idiot like topped all 3 of the pear trees, and almost in my opinion, they were almost like too old to do that too. Like these pear trees probably only have like, some of them might only have like 10 years left. So it's like, why would you top it? Let it come down naturally, and then it'll make more of itself. Like old apple trees are just like crazy resilient because they've been around for 100 years in that spot in some form or fashion, just crashing over, suckers rebuilding over and over and over. And if you just let them do that, sure, the deer and the elk and the antelope and the buffalo and the wolf and the bear will come and eat the apples, but like that tree has like the resiliency to just keep coming back forever. Like you don't need to fuck with it. And thank goodness that they didn't top the apple tree, because I think the apple tree is really old, and I think had already split, or maybe it had been three and then the middle one got like broken off or something, and so like the two sides have turned into like kind of two symbiotic parts of the apple tree. Like um you can I don't know, like I always think back to when we lived at this one place, and one day the landlord came and just like sawed the producing apple tree down, and it was out in the middle. It wasn't even remotely near the house, or it was out in like the field behind the place. And he just like sawed it down one day, just the apple tree, and like that's the kind of person he was. And it's just like, dude, fuck you and fuck this place, man. Like it kills me, you know. When I left my dad's house, you know, I didn't think things were gonna go as bad as they went. In regards to like, I always think of this like he had like 30-year-old massive blueberry bushes. He had 30, 40-year-old massive apple trees and cherry trees. Enough to where you could have made pies and jarred them and everything, and cherry trees for like the rest of your life. Like more than you could physically ever eat or pick on his property. And it's just like there's people out there that will just, you know, level all of that to put a driveway because their brains are just like rotten. They do not understand. And I always think back to that phrase about how we put trees in the ground for like generations of people that we're never going to meet, you know. And every time you see a tree on the ground, every time you see like an apple, a producing apple tree, you basically have to like think somebody who is, you have to think somebody who's like long since dead and passed and gone. But like these apple trees and these blueberry bushes and stuff are like the legacy that we give to the next generation. And you just hope that they're not some fucking retard that's gonna chop them down to, you know, make their driveway 6 inches wider. Like, we've failed as a society. Um, and if you can't find, if you can't find a way to either buy a piece of land or support somebody else that has a piece of land and just like plant as much fruit there as you can, we're doomed just on that like alone. Because and I know there's other, it's not bananas, is it coconuts? It's not coconuts, there's some kiwis, there's some avocados, there's some plant out there that just like takes like 40 years before it matures enough to produce anything, and like a whole island of them got wiped out a while back. Like, and I know like, you know, the oranges and like, you know, a bug farts in the wind and you're not getting any orange juice that year from Florida. And it's just like, not to be all like hippy dippy, you know, we didn't listen, climate change, but like, if you don't plant, if you don't plant fruit trees, or if you don't go out and try to find or save fruit trees and bushes and stuff, like somebody you never know in the future who's never going to know you know, is going to need that. and or they're going to need the critters that want to come and eat it. And our last roommates, there was probably some 7, 8, 9 year, going on maybe 10-year blueberry bushes there. Actually, probably a little bit older than that because we were there for 5 years. Uh, a couple, like 2 or 3, like really good producing 10 or 15-year blueberry bushes really ends up being like maybe like a couple $100 worth of blueberries a year. Really easy to preserve them. So, I don't know. It bums me out, I think, but that's why I'm trying to do a little bit of both. I'm trying to get the veggies figured out, and I'm trying to get the grapes. That's right. I'm trying to think through everything. The grapes, one of the grapes isn't doing very much. The other grape was doing great, but the deer, sorry, kept chewing down the runners, and now the grape has to kind of like rethink its strategy. Just unfortunately, it grew. Grapes take like 4 months before they decide to do anything. But then once they decide to do stuff, like they go. Grapes will go once they decide that they like the spot that they're in. And one of the 2 grapes just went for it, but the deer nibbled the runners off. But grapes also really resilient, and so that's what I want. I want apple, cherry, and pear orchard, and then a couple of other things that the last people left. I want like triple the amount. I want like 20 apple trees. Well, 20 apple / cherry trees on this property. I want like an acre of like trees that produce. I want at least one more grape. The nice thing is, at least last year, this last year, grapes were really affordable. I would have bought a third one, but we didn't have a lot of resources at the time. But now I think we might make a pilgrimage to the plant nursery and see if they're finally ready to part with some of that stuff for a little bit more of a reasonable price. Yeah, then blueberries, huckleberries, elderberries. Lots and lots and lots of strawberries. I want there to be so many strawberries that I don't have to worry about the deer and the rabbits anymore, because the strawberries are largely going to be like distractionary, but they're going to pair really good with the rhubarb. And since I was doing the rhubarb all through the winter, like all of those rhubarb made it. So those rhubarb are now being planted all over the yard. And to be honest, I think this winter, I think I'll buy another rhubarb pack of seeds, which is they're like $1. And then I might just like plant rhubarb all over the house again, like I did last winter. Rhubarb is very, what's the word? Uplifting? I don't know. I can't think of the word. It's good for morale. Watching the little rhubarbs grow, and the rhubarb leaves are so cool looking. And I think one of the cats did decide to be a dum-dum and eat one of them, but it's like the cat didn't die, so like okay, whatever. There's something that eats the ones outside too, but I think it's some kind of bug or slug or something. But I think the deer will eat them too, but we'll see. So next year, all of those rhubarbs should be producing a decent amount of rhubarb. And then I'll have the strawberries and rhubarb, which is a great combo. So, I mean, I've got a lot of these plans. Like, you might think, oh, that's like super expensive, but you just wait for sales. Or, you wait for discounts, or you wait for plants that are kind of down on their luck that other people don't know how to take care of. And then you bring them out here. And so that's what we did. And there's ways that you can get a tree going a little bit faster, but there's like some luck involved. You got to make sure the deer don't eat it. You got to make sure the bugs don't get to it. You got to make sure it doesn't get fried. But I think that there's still hope. I think there's still time. And I think if you know how to take care of them, I think that growing kind of robust. Oh, and we have raspberries too. One of the raspberries is doing really well. The other raspberry's not. I think the other raspberry got choked out by the grass. But we'll see. We'll see how it does. We'll see if it just bounces back. But the other raspberry's doing great. I think that there's such a huge morale booster. Like, even if you're not producing enough food, I think that it gives you some of your control. It gives you some semblance of control back. Does that make sense? Like, it gives you a semblance of control back in your life. It is daunting though, because adequately protecting a tree from deer, elk, and the 5 different ground varmints is a lot of work, and it is expensive, right? You've got to get some pretty strong poles, and you've got to get some pretty serious potentially 5 or 6 feet of wiring around them. And they do kind of look like crap. But once you kind of get over it and realize that, like, everybody has to do that, or their trees are just going to be dead. And yeah, like, those are probably going to have to be around the trees for a long time. But every year you can go out there and you can make them a little bit wider. You can make them a little bit taller. And I think eventually, in 10 years, those trees will be big enough to not need it anymore. I think the trunks will always need to be wrapped, like, forever. Or some little shit will just come and ring the damn thing and kill it, which is infuriating and heartbreaking at the same time. But that's a small price to pay. Yes, it looks kind of dumb. Doesn't look natural at all, but I think you have to. So I'm going to be working on ways to, like, hopefully make that, like, not look stupid. But a lot of it's that, like, rustic, farm aesthetic anyway, where everything out here just kind of looks janky. And it looks janky because everybody's just kind of grabbing whatever they can grab and keep going. Like, I think I've said this before, the people that come out here with a lot of money stick out like a sore thumb. If you have brand new stuff out here and you make a nice looking fence or a nice looking garden, which I get it, the ladies out there, want to have a nice looking garden, you know, I get it. But like, man, you stick out like a sore thumb, and you probably paid 3 times as much, or you've got a husband that's a handyman, or you're a handy man, handy woman, farm gal. Uh, if you have a nice looking fence, a nice looking garden, man, you stick out. So everything looking, farm punk. Uh, you just blend in because everything out here looks old and janky and thrown together, and multiple generations of people just trying to make it work because nobody out here has any money, especially not now. The only people that have money around here are these like Richie Riches moving in. I mean, some of these are like mansions, and they're on like it's like a mansion on 5 acres. I mean, they're like multi-million-dollar properties. Um, it's nuts. So like, I think I brought this up before, but like, who could move out here? Who could really afford this? Um, that's I don't know. I don't. I'm convinced that even with a doctor's salary, you couldn't afford these new places that they're putting up. And so I think some of them are going. Some of them for sure are going up for rent. And I don't know what's going on with the rest, but they're trying to force everybody back in the office again. And unless you're willing to drive, you know, multiple hours, which some people are, um, statistically speaking, being out here in the middle of nowhere and only having to go in sometimes, you're still way safer if you have good communications with and intel on what's going on in the cities. But I think even if you worked from home, you'd have to be juggling like 3 jobs and maybe have a spouse that's juggling like a job or two to be able to afford these houses. I mean, the mortgage has got to be like 5,000 or more a month, more, and then that's not even talking about interest rates. So there's like some pretty big mansions around here. I don't mean overpriced 3 bed, 2 bath. I mean like, you know, 7 bedroom, 5 bath with a den and this and that and bloopity blah. Um, you'd have to have serious money, but then why would you be moving out here? You just want like a beautiful place to retire. I guess if you're like a tech bro that retired, or if you're like and you're like a wannabe, you know, prepper, like the rich people version of a prepper, like you could grab something out here maybe, but like if I was gonna drop like a mill or two on a place, not that I ever would or could because I'm not rich, but if I was, I would be buying like an old orchard. I would if I had that kind of FU money, I would just go buy an actual orchard. And they do have those. Those are for sale. Um, that's what I would do. I wouldn't go buy. I wouldn't go buy this like a romanticized version of like farmland. I can't think of the right word. Like a facsimile of farmland. Like this is farmland. Like that is hay grass out there. But I've seen these places where it's like you guys ripped out all the hay grass and then you put in like normal lawn grass, but you're in the middle of nowhere. And You just want like this weird, I can't even think of the right word. You want like your nice manicured like bug out location or something like I don't know who does that or who lives like that anymore. That's like so 80s. You know, that's like a massive callback to like a long time ago. There aren't like mansion spots like that anymore that are zoned for that. And it wasn't until I was listening to LTT yesterday where Luke was talking about up in British Columbia, um, where all the Richie Riches have bought up all the farmland and they all live on mansions on like illegally zoned farmland. And that's what all the rich people have done. They live out in the middle of nowhere, but they're all just like manicured, like I'll call them like in a state. They have managed to create like an estate, except they used farmland for it. And that's what the people here are doing. They're putting like estates on their farmland. And yeah, capitalism, blah, blah, blah. And if you have money, you should, and all that. My point is, they stick out like sore thumbs. Like, you're driving around in farmland, and all of a sudden you go by somebody's house that looks like a damn golf course. Uh, you know, like, hello. I mean, that just looks like a loot drop waiting to happen, and you can see their 100-foot TV from the road. Wait, 100-foot, 100-inch TV, 100-foot TV. My bad, 100-inch TV. Um, and just like anyway, everything's gonna look janky. And despite what I said last time, make your place look uninviting, and how that's not gonna work. This place doesn't look uninviting. This whole area doesn't look well. There's only one place that looks uninviting, um, and I think that's a big problem. But that looks like the kind of uninviting of like they have nothing to lose, kind of uninviting. Um, that's the bad house. Um, you can't look like the bad house without acting like you have nothing to lose either. Um, but I think that also attracts like the wrong attention too. I think if you look like the bad house, I think you're going to attract a lot of attention. But I think if you if it looks like your mansion's on a golf course, you're going to attract the wrong kind of attention too. So, um, like mowing this place makes it stick out, but like letting it grow up makes it stick out too, because everybody else has a big, combine that comes by and turns it all into straw, hay bales. So if yours doesn't go get hay baled at the same times that everyone else's gets hay baled, you're going to stick out. You kind of can't fake that unless when everybody else is going out to get hay baled, that's the only time you mow it all year. But like if everybody else has cows and goats and sheep that are eating down their yard, your yard's never going to quite look like all of their yards. So that's that whole kind of like ag, um, like what's his agricultural gray man? look like. But also, you have to constantly have a presence outside because everybody else is always working outside. So if you're not always working outside, and they've been working outside their entire life, you have to be working outside too, or they're going to be like, oh, that's is that the neighbor? It's like, dude, fuck you. I'm like 5 feet away from you. I can hear you talking. So it's like, yeah, yeah, I'm the neighbor. I know I'm not like you guys. I don't have, a tractor and a quad, and one of those hunting buggy things. But you also, like, when you do your area study, you realize some of these people own like 4 or 5 properties. So you see them driving around with their stuff on their trailer all day. It's because they're going from one of their properties to another, to another, to another, to another. It takes massive amounts of upkeep. But some of these people have apple trees so big that they couldn't possibly eat them all. So it's just like, you gotta really like be able to bust your butt to like get out and network with these people. And if you're like in the wrong state of mind at the wrong time, you don't think about it like, oh, hey, that guy's outside working on his apples. Like, let me go talk to him and hope he doesn't blow my head off. Um, you know, hey, are these your apples? Cool, I live a couple down. Like, I'm all out of apples. Are you going to be going through these? You want to share some of them? You want me to buy some of these apples off you so I can preserve more of them? And it might be like, yeah, sure. Or like, no, no, we got someone coming this weekend. So I don't know. It's tough. Like, networking's tough, and you're gonna miss opportunities. And if you force it, it's obvious because then you come off as desperate. It's really interesting. It's definitely a juggling act. I think, like I've said before, I've had to resign to the fact that I'm never going to be friends with my neighbors. But we just kind of coexist. And I feel bad because it is abundantly clear to me now that they have nearly infinite resources compared to me. And they aren't proactively sharing any of it. And I don't know if I did something or said something, or if I'm my posture or my attitude. But like, man, they've got so much property. They could, they've got so much dirt. Dirt is worth hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. But like, obviously, they've got so much property. They could just give me a little scoop of dirt from somewhere, and like, that dirt would be worth hundreds of dollars to me. But it's just like, just scooping up a little bit of dirt somewhere. Or, if I had a tractor, I could just go scoop up dirt from one part of my property and go bring dirt to a different part of my property. But tractors are hellaciously expensive. And I think the thing is, like, I think the farmers, rightfully so, are like hoarding tractors and tractor parts because they know they can't repair new tractors. And tractors are basically like gold. Like, don't buy gold. Buy old tractors and tractor attachments. Those are gold. If you have like a tractor or some kind of like a buggy, um, something that you can put a little, attachment on to just move things around. Oh my gosh, like, or if you have, a little trailer, like, those things put you on like a different tier. But you have to have the energy and the time to be able to do all that. So how are you supposed to work all day? and do that. Well, I guess there's still remote work out there, but I guess after I take a quick break, that's a good segue to our sponsor, Getting a Job. Okay, I'll be back. I'm going to adjust my phone settings to not go to sleep every 5 minutes to make this easier, and hopefully there hasn't been too many snap crackle popping, and hopefully this whole thing's not blown out, because I swear I've tried to talk about this so many times and give the farm update and it never works out for some reason. So I'll be back in a little bit. Thanks for listening to the Stream of Consciousness podcast. Be right back. Welcome back. Thanks. It's good to be back. This is part 2 of the rambling to myself and the 5 other people that listen to this podcast. Where were we? The cities. So, election day is some amount of time away now. Got our ballots. Thank goodness we don't live in a state that has ranked choice voting yet. If you've never seen that on the Twitters, the people are sharing from the next state over. They're sharing their ranked choice voting ballots. It is the biggest cluster of a disaster. Talk about like high school PTSD. Just a nightmare of columns and bubbles of choice 1 through 5. The absolute most flawed ass voting system on the planet. And I think it's like it's mathematically provable that it is like demonstrably flawed as a voting system. But somebody pointed out they're like, like there's no way that this the software algorithm is going to get this thing right. They're like, it can't even get normal voting and yes and no voting right. Like, you want it to get ranked choice. So if you're unfamiliar imagine if you're like, I would prefer this to happen, but if it's okay if this happened, and then this is like the least amount thing that I want to happen. That's like what ranked choice is like. If we can't have, Godfather's pizza, can we have, you know, Five Guys? And if we can't have Five Guys, like, I guess I'll end up with Carl's Jr.'s or something. I promise I just ate, so I'm not thinking about food. But for some reason, it's like, that's usually what it is, right? Like, we'll go see how bad Wendy's is, and we'll decide if maybe we're going to try Burger King or Dairy Queen. That's like ranked choice in a nutshell. The problem is if you have a bunch of people in the car and half of them want Burger King and half of them want Dairy Queen, then like how do you assign like a priority to people who put, like, what if half the people put Burger King first and half the people put Burger King as second, and then the inverse, and then the same thing happens with like Dairy Queen? Then like how is that like a method of governance? How is that like democracy? How is that? Like, if you wanted to do that stupidity for like the primary, which is already flawed, the primary system is already flawed as far as I'm concerned, and ranked is like a step worse than that. Like, this is how the the election is going to go. Like, in some states, this stupid ranked choice voting system. And if you look into the math of it, it's clear that this is another one of those convoluted ass, half baked cuckoo clock concoctions that like the lefty loos come up with in their think tanks to make things so fucking confusing that they're gonna win. And you hear the left complain about gerrymandering, which is hilarious to me because both sides do it. So that was one of those things I was talking about, like maybe in one of the last couple, where the left like lacks any self-awareness at all and will continually blame the right for everything, even though they themselves are at the very least doing it, at the very worst just completely projecting their bullshit onto everybody. And one of the things they like to do is they make these convoluted ass voting systems where they'll give themselves another district, and then that district has to have, a new representative. And then, oh, shock, that district and that representative just happen to support their way of thinking predominantly. And, oh, whoops, that just happened to be like the swing vote. And, oh, whoops, they just gave themselves emergency powers. And, oh, whoops, everybody else just got voted off. And, oh, whoops, now they can unilaterally decide everything, which is very common. They do that in like local county level stuff all the time. And before you know it, they'll unilaterally control an entire county. And they'll have their own school superintendents, and they'll have their own the police will be in their bag. And then you've got like the firefighters running around going, what just happened? Who's in charge of this thing? And it's like, oh, well, unfortunately now the same person that's in charge of the fire department and education and health and human services and everything else. And then so what do? They go, oh, well, that's terrible. We need to break that out. So you know what they do? They hire 10 more of their buddies. And then they're like, oh, that's not gonna do. How we need more support staff. And then each of those 10 buddies hires 10 more buddies. And you're just like, what just happened? And then you're like, oh, but people could still, if it got bad enough, theoretically people could still vote it out, right? Well, unfortunately, no, because like in one instance, the DA has been voted out for like, I don't know, a solid like 4 months now, and he just won't leave his post, and he won't start transferring responsibilities over because he wants to wait all the way up until like the last second. So the people's will, and that's already in a lefty lou, very far lefty lou city, and they can't even get in the new DA that they voted for, and it's just like, you guys, your own system that you guys created is already broken. You can't blame conservatives for this. Like, they are just so wildly inept at governance. And the next state over, um, the conservatives just started walking out because the lefty loos needed their votes, just as like they needed like a quorum, like a consensus to have their votes. And so the conservatives figured out, oh, all we got to do is just not show up, and they can't vote in these like freaking draconian taxes upon taxes upon taxes, and just gun control on top of gun control, and um, log everything and chop all the trees down and throw additional fuel taxes onto the loggers and all this stuff. So the conservatives figured out, all we got to do is just not show up. Well, they sent state patrol out to go find them and stuff, but people sheltered them, and then ended up okay. Well, the lefty loos said like they have like a stranglehold on our democracy. This is a threat to democracy. And so basically they put, if you don't show up to vote on things, even though in parentheses your vote doesn't matter, but they still have to have the vote, even though they're going to push in whatever they're going to push in anyway. Well, okay, so none of those conservatives can run anymore. So basically you've got like 2/3 of the state that are rural, and they don't have enough votes to do anything. But now all of their legally democratically elected representatives now can't rerun anymore, even though they did exactly what everybody wanted them to do, which is just abstain from voting because their vote wouldn't matter. So, but you could have 100% of all left in office in that state, and it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter anyway. They wouldn't be any more productive because the infighting for them is absolutely like notorious, because there's left, and then there's like far left, and similar I would say to like Russia and maybe Iran and China. Like any other big country has the same problem, where you still have tons of unelected government bodies figuring everything out for you, but then you also have just the rampant homeless industrial complex. All these just massive competing levels of corruption and insider trading, and it's just millions, tens of millions of dollars, billions of dollars getting squandered at the state level, not to mention the federal level. So like, some of them will want to put more houses in, but like they won't agree where to put them. So they're like, well, we need to bulldoze down. We need to bulldoze the federally protected rainforest, to put in more houses. No, we can't do that. And then the power company will be like, we need to bulldoze down federally protected forests to put in more power lines. No, we can't do that. Meanwhile, like the homeless are filling up the forests with homeless encampments, and this is like they want to defund the police, and then they want to have completely legalized drugs, and just no facilities. It's just the whole thing, and then they don't protect women at all. You follow the Twitter feeds of some of the people that go around Portland. The things that happen to women on the streets of Portland is horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. And then you're like, wow, Portland looks really bad. So what do? They were just doing this again the other day. Some person like, this is day 67 of me telling you guys how awesome Portland is. And it's all skyline shots. It's like 4 skyline shots. I'm like, dude, there's women being trafficked in broad daylight in your streets. There's drugs and needles and stuff everywhere, like still every day. The homeless population has gotten bigger. The immigrant population has gotten bigger, and it's all unsupported. Like, if you want to have 1 billion homeless people or like 1 billion immigrants, like, more power to you, sanctuary city. But like, you have to take care of it, and that's where like you can have all left leaning. You can have the biggest left leaning utopia on the planet with just no conservatives to get in your way, and they will still not be functioning at all. They'll still overtax everybody, and they'll have to give the taxes right back, and there'll be tens of millions that just keep disappearing. They can't run their own homeless. They can't run their own immigration. They can't run their own unemployment. They gave Intel metric shit tons of money, and Intel just laid off like another 1,500 people. Like, and people are leaving, employers are leaving in droves because there's no, just based on like commercial real estate alone. And LTT was talking about this too up in British Columbia. Like, this is the same everywhere. Like, up in Seattle, Amazon's trying to force everybody back to justify all this infrastructure, but like, people just aren't going to do it. And if you think, oh, well, good, that's a good employment opportunity, Amazon's going to lay all those people off and not backfill those positions. That'll be their justification. Oh, well, we tried to make everyone go back and they didn't, so we laid them all off, and whoopsie daisy, I guess we're just going to stop paying the lease on this building or whatever. I mean, maybe they own some of those. But man, oh man. And there was supposed to be a thing where they covered, not up there, but south a little bit more, where they covered like all the new mayor candidates were supposed to cover their plans for converting commercial real estate to residential, multifamily residential, but that part was like cut off of the broadcast. But unless you can turn those into multifamily residential, like those buildings, and the ones down south, most of them aren't retrofitted, or they would have done it by now. I don't know if you up north, I don't know if you can convert Amazon's buildings to multi-residential. I think the ones that they could have, I think a lot of those they already did. I think several of Amazon's buildings have been homeless buildings for quite a while. But based on some of the ones I've seen in Portland, not Amazon, but like other companies, like, dude, it looks like Judge Dredd. Like, it looks like RoboCop. The things that happen in those places is horrible. And you can have security and you can have barred everything, and people sneak in there, and it's, quote unquote delivering pizza, you know, and man, it's a mess. Like, you do not. I know I say this all the time. Like, you do not know how bad it is. You can't imagine how bad it is. But this is where they want everybody to keep coming to work, and everybody just needs to say no. And my brain's like trying. It was really scattered, and it's trying to collect all this stuff. But basically, like, the election violence is going to be bad no matter who wins. Food prices are going to go up, and the stock market's rallying right now because it thinks Orange Man's going to win. The stock market always crashes, regardless of who wins or loses. The uncertainty just keeps it going longer, keeps the influx longer. Portland's not there. One of the mayors is like, I could get another 100 cops right now, and then we can get another 100 cops, in like a year or something. But it's like, with what money? Because you guys can't even agree on like what kind of cops you want to have to begin with. Like, you guys keep voting to defund the police. You think they're going to fund the police more? Like, you've barely got like 2 squads of like riot cops right now, which isn't even enough to hold this, an intersection. Like, once the civil unrest pops off, like, that's it. I honestly don't know what's taking so long. I think the civil unrest is happening like a little bit, and they're just keeping it under wraps. But like, yeah, see, like, I lost part of my train of thought. Like, being a cop would be like a really high paying job. So like, that would be, in theory, it would be good job security. But like, what's the likelihood that you're gonna make it? And with your family still intact, and that it's not going to go to your head, or that people aren't going to get their hooks in you. Like, it's insane, right? Like, why would you be a cop right now? Only if it was like only if it was the last thing, right? But like, they have the budget to do it. They're just acting like they don't. This is that game they play, where they act like they don't have money for health and human services, but you dig into it and you see that it's all a ploy. Because despite it all being left-leaning ran, the city, the state, the county, all left-leaning, right? They can't even agree on like the rules for homeless. They can't even agree on who's supposed to clean up graffiti, who, like, where the homeless are supposed to go to get rehabilitated, and they just keep doling out like more drugs. There's like trucks that just drive drugs around. Like, and I think they finally have like the one rehab center going. And this is all, they can't blame this on conservatives. This is all them. This is all them. And the left just does not want to hold their own responsible. Ever. If the left, and I'm not saying the right isn't without problems, because they're a bunch of just rhino uniparty idiots. That's not what I'm saying. Everybody knows that. What I'm saying is, like, these leftist cities and these leftist states, and California. You don't think that I'm not. Don't think that I forgot about you. They don't have any conservatives to blame this on. New York, Chicago. This is all 100% them, right? So, like, show us the way. Show us how awesome things can be. But instead, you know what they do? They lose tens of billions of dollars. They overtax everybody. They don't even, you can't even tell you where it's going. And then they need federal bailout money for infrastructure. And then that money just disappears. It just disappears. Billions of dollars. Where did it go? Oh, we needed to do another assessment. Go figure out how many assessments they've done on the I-5 bridge. And the news just like sits there, stands there with their smirk and their smuggy attitudes towards, like, oh, careful, sissy. All their smug attitudes on their election, their so-called, election fact-checking, where they're like, actually, this is true. He really did do this according to... I'm like, but in the grand scheme of things, who cares? Like, they don't do any context. They don't have any context for why an accusation is even important or not. So they'll just, once, they fact check something and find it's true, they get their pearls out and they clutch the hell out of those pearls. And they're like, actually, that accusation is completely true. But, like, contextually, it's contextually irrelevant. And it doesn't matter if it's like abortion or the border or Second Amendment. Like, the media does not hold anybody in these elections, on either side, quite frankly, accountable. And then, Saturday Night Live has to come around, and the, Daily Show with Jon Stewart has to come around, and with their smug, and it's like, you guys are all lying. You realize that they're all lying and that they're all grossly misrepresenting what happens, because they know that most of their audience isn't going to go watch it. But then they'll go fact check conservatives and they'll be like, they cherry picked that. Contextually, that's not what that means. That's contextually a really far stretch. I was like, no, I mean, if somebody says that, like, we don't care about the border, why don't they go out? Why don't they go out and actually ask people if they really do care about the border? Like, nobody. It's like that Watchmen show. I don't really like the Watchmen show, but it's like, who watches the Watchers or whatever? Who watches the Watchmen? That's like what independent news is. Like, who fact checks the news? The news that controls the entire narrative. These smug, pearl clutching, fake comedians that are all just different facets of this corptocracy. Just absolute government blended with, corporate and media into just this big ball. I mean, this is like everything that they warned us about. That, like, when they were talking about, communism and, like, the Bolshevik Revolution and the Iron Curtain, and not the Iron Curtain, the Red Curtain, the Iron Red Curtain, whatever. Like, all these countries that like control their media, like Chinese state-run media, like UK's state-run media, like you have to have absolute freedom of speech and freedom of thought to be able to like work through these ideas. You have to have these thought experiments, and you have to feel safe to be able to say these things. I mean, people are going to challenge you, but like that whole, well, you can have freedom of speech and I can show you the door. It's like, well, what's it called? Where's the town square supposed to be? Where are you supposed to have public discourse if they can just show you the door? Okay, well, where? I can't remember what it's called, but it's like what Berkeley was, where you'd go there to have like your thoughts challenged, your ideas challenged, so you could have discourse. And maybe people weren't always like articulate as they should be, and you can't just shout them down. You have to try to let them get their thought out. But like, you go to work, and like nobody wants to hear what you have to say. Okay, so you're at the dinner table and nobody wants to hear what you have to say. You can't go to college because they'll club you like a baby seal. You can't go grab a sign and march around outside because you're going to get clubbed like a baby seal. So like, if you're anti-abortion, you can't go outside a clinic because that's going to be some kind of taken some kind of way. Like, they've like weaponized like culture against speech, to where if you worry if you say certain things, the goon squad's going to show up to your house. They've got everybody so scared that they don't want to say anything because, well, we can show you the door. That is just such like a disgusting, like thinly veiled threat. We can show you the door. Well, not only can they show you the door, but they can show up at your door, and then they can deplatform you from everything, and then you go make your own platform, and they can get Cloudflare shut off, they can get your domain shut off, and if all that fails, they can just shut the whole internet off by just shutting off the domain, the domain recognition thing. ICANN. That, I think that's what it is. Like, they can just, like, and then what do we have? Radio. We have radio, right? And then everyone's like, wow, don't get your radio license, because you could just use your radio in emergency. Just use your radio in emergency. Well, I'm not going to get my license because those ham fuds are such ham Germans. World War II Germans. Like, if you want to exercise your freedom of speech, and look, I've thought about it more, and I think like ham radio is, or just radios, I think radios like are freedom of speech, right? But you go get your license to show that you understand that there's technical aspects of the radio that are like good radio stewardship, because there's technical aspects to them. Don't broadcast at too high of a wattage. Now people are like, well, obviously. Yeah, but it's not obvious to somebody who barely has, I mean, we're very soon dealing with people that barely have a high school education again anymore. Like, we're going to be dealing with people who can't type. We're going to be dealing with people that can't read. Like, literacy is going to be non-existent, let alone people that understand electronics. So, like, in real life, speech just means, okay, you understand that you can't yell, right? Okay, cool. Well, you can come into the movie theater as long as you just, you're not going to yell. You're not going to be a dick. Just stay off your phone or whatever. Like, well, radio's a lot more complicated. However, I'll concede a little bit by saying it would be like a lot like if you had to go get your driver's license, if you had to learn like way more about your car. But there is a lot of people that think that you shouldn't get your driver's license without being able to change your own oil and tires. Be like, oh, you don't know how to change your tires. You don't know how to change your oil. Yeah, you know what? I have a fucking life. Like, there's other shit that I know. Like, isn't that good enough? I don't know how to put in new windows in my house either, but like, I can buy one, right? Like, you can cause way more damage in a car, than a radio, I'd argue. But people drive around in cars all the time without driver's licenses. Oh, there's consequences for that. No, there's not. I mean, only if you have money and something to lose. But there's people that drive around with no license plate, no insurance now. That's what's driving insurance up so high. So, we'll abolish the FCC. Well, I think the FCC has a lot of good they could do. And I don't know who's in charge right now, but like, FCC could do a lot of good. People that misuse our communication infrastructure, there should be some kind of governance in there for that. I think statistically that probably almost never happens on radios. Maybe 0.001%. I would say it's almost all universally, the misuse of internet now. Meaning, people who send spam and viruses and, phishing attempts and people who, identity thieves and stuff. And, maybe the FCC could like work with the FBI a little bit, depending on who's the specialists and what. But I think like, swatting especially. If you've never been a victim of identity theft or if you've never been a victim of swatting, just realize that your view of life is like extremely narrow as to like the horrible things that people can do by misusing our communication infrastructure. But so I think what I would do with radios, I still think it has to be like a registered system, because I think you should have to learn a little bit, because Amazon isn't going to institute something where they check and make sure that you actually know how to use a radio before you can buy a radio. And I don't think that you should have to put in your little code. But the funny thing is, you actually do have to put in your little code when you get a digital radio, because they found a way to gatekeep that. So I'm not saying that like radios need to be gatekept. And it's the same thing with pistols. Well, you should have to get training to go get a pistol, because why would you ever need more than 6 rounds? Like, I don't know what a perfect solution would look like, but you already can't get these idiots to train on how to use the radios now. So obviously getting a license isn't going to fix just this arrogant stupidity. I can't even think of a word that these LARPers that, and it's not just radios, it's everything. They don't open up stuff. And they think they're going to be, Billy Badass. Oh, if there's a hurricane, I've got my radio and I'm just going to use it and F those ham thuds. It's like, dude, you don't even know. Your radio's probably never even been plugged in or turned on, and the battery's probably not even in it. And it's not programmed. You're not doing anything with that thing. But you're sitting here on Twitter running your mouth like you're some fucking John Wick, like with your radio when shit hits the fan. Meanwhile, everybody else is actually training and actually getting their licenses and actually practicing and being good radio stewards. Like, you shouldn't need a license for a gun either. Okay? So no, I don't think you need a license for a radio either. But I think there needs to be, if you're broadcasting in a way that could be like super disruptive, something needs to there needs to be something. Now you might say, but you can just go fly a drone near an airport. It's like, well, the FAA has ways that they, try to limit that. Do I think that's good or bad? I think it's problematic because I think um, there could be emergency situations where you need to fly your drone and it thinks that there's air traffic and there's not. So like it's not perfect. So really what I'm advocating for is for the human race to not be fucking retarded. Now, what's the likelihood of that? Zero, obviously. So like you at the end of the day, you have to err on like total freedom. And that's fine. I'm fine with that. I just think like if you're gonna put up, okay, it's no different than if you build like a 200-foot tower and then the FAA is like, dude, you can't build a 200-foot tower. Like, planes are gonna smack into it. There's a lot of stuff you have to register your tower so we know that we can navigate around it. Like, there is a universe that we could live in where the human race is not stupid as shit. Okay, and then you don't even need to register cars. Tabs are done. Dumb. License plates. What's the point? If someone steals your car, you still have the VIN. What are license plates even for? What are tabs even for? What's a driver's license even for? Right? But like, what if you're driving a semi? Do you think just anyone should be able to drive a semi? Or do you think like it has a lot of specialized stuff and someone should have to go get like, their CDL, their class A? Like, maybe for radios it would be, after you want to go broadcast over a certain wattage. I don't know. I don't know how it would work. I don't know how I already will admit that there's no way to police that. Right. So I'm not saying that this is something that would be a registry and databases and stuff. I've done videos about that before. I think the ham registry is insanely dangerous for doxing. No different than I think PayPal or just banking in general. I don't think PayPal should be able to dox people. I think there's vulnerable women out there that want to have PayPal and their information shouldn't get out. There's vulnerable creators out there that want to keep their family safe. Like, why do you have to have an ID to have a bank? Why can't you just have a bank? Why why do the banks be able to talk to each other if you're upside down in a bank and you need to open up a new bank account so you can actually pay your bills without them going into like a negative black hole with another bank? So like, I get it. I don't want there to be ham licensing. I guess what I'm trying to say is like the training still needs to exist. The ham training is good. The certification questions are good. It's no different from like medical. Like you can try to render medical aid and do your best without a medical license, you know. And I think one of the biggest deterrents to people using radios is the fact that you have to get your ham license to be on the ham bands, and the ham bands are where it's the best place to practice if you have a buddy helping you. Like, no, you should be able to just go out and buy a gun. If you're too dangerous to own a gun, then you shouldn't be in general population. And I think it should be the same thing with radios and cars. And if you can't, there's murderers out on the streets right now that the courts said that they're too incompetent to stand trial. Like, if you're too incompetent to stand trial, you're not really beholden to any of our laws, and you just shouldn't be here. And so I think if you're like a United States citizen in good standing, you should be able to get a car and a gun and a radio and an armor and drones and nods, like all of it. And that should just be a part of you being a US citizen. And if you're a jackass on the radio, it lowers your social credit score or something. I don't know. Someone comes and takes your radios away until you stop being a jackass on the radio. It's no different than getting red flagged and having all your guns taken away even though you didn't do anything. It's no different than, doctors asking the kid, if mommy and daddy have any guns at home. Even though it's none of their business. Like, what about chainsaws? Like there's so many just insanely dangerous things out there. There's no like chainsaw license. You can just go out and buy as many chainsaws as you want. There's no common sense chainsaw legislation. And doctors will be like, well, I'm sick and tired of treating gunshot wounds. Oh, you don't hear them complaining about chainsaws, probably because the person just doesn't make it. I don't know. But they don't want you to teach chainsaw safety to your kids, even though your kids are going to be around chainsaw. Like, that's how I would do it. Like, as a United States citizen, you're expected to. This is a drone. You're going to be safe with drones. These are radios. You're going to be safe with radios. These are guns. You're going to be safe around guns. Like, a contract is being here. These are cars. You're going to be safe with cars. If you don't like cars, then don't drive one. If you don't like guns, don't get one. If you don't like radios, don't get one. If you don't like drones or armor or nods or rifles, then don't get them. But you're a United States citizen now. These are your responsibilities. And by the way, if we ever get attacked, you're going to have to help defend us. And then in an emergency, you can take over radios if you need to, or you can help with drones. Like, bring everybody up. Bring everybody up, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like, it was a long time before I learned how to use a chainsaw. And there is quite a curve there. But, like, if I had to go get a chainsaw license and go through chainsaw training, it would have been, I think, a little too... That would have been cool, I guess. But I don't really know if anyone has chainsaw classes, or I don't think there's like a chainsaw license. I don't think there should be, But maybe if you were going to commercially, okay, like commercially do radios or commercially do chainsaws or commercially do drones, that's different, you know. For example, like if you're going to be doing commercial welding, talk about things that are dangerous. Holy shit. Running a welding thing is crazy, right? Like you have to take tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of classes to learn how to do all the welding properly. But like if you need to go weld something yourself, you don't have to go get your welding license. You know. I think there's probably just a couple things that aren't obvious with the radios. Like I said, don't build a 200-foot tower. Uh, without getting some some consultant, someone consulting you first. That's a whole deal. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Um, I don't like the nanny. I don't like the nanny state, but I want people to get trained. So like that doesn't mean make training mandatory, and because all it does is just like sow more division. All the LARPers, it gives the LARPers something to be dicks about, and then it just empowers the FUDs to just get more entrenched. It doesn't bring everybody together. Like all the old school hams could be like super useful in a shit it's the fan. But like it's the same thing with guns. Like what Colio Noir had that thing where it's like the 4 types of gun owners or whatever. Oh, the sunset looks amazing. Um, the 4 types of gun owners, hunters, collectors, tactical people, and defensive pistol. I think, or no, hunters, safe queens, aka collectors, tactical guys, yeah, and like defensive pistol. They're never just all going to get along. They don't see each other as being on the same team, and that's the same problem with radios. It's just like just I guess this is my idealism kicking in. I was going to talk about my idealism versus like nihilism, but like I'm not saying that I wish it could be this way. I'm saying this is where I stand on the subject. Um, I know that's being idealistic, but that's what I would do. But since I can't do that, you know, I get the bare amount of registrations as I need to keep going, and I try to keep myself as protected as I can. But understanding, same thing with my speech, just to kind of tie it all up. Understanding that my speech is going to get taken out of context and people are going to weaponize my speech against me, and but like we need the town square. I guess back to my idealism again, like we need the town square, and if we're not gonna try to have a town square, then we're all just sitting here waiting to be ran over by the people that get a town square because they're willing to hold the town square, literally and figuratively. And it's no different than at work. Yeah, you can't talk about whatever you want at work, but if everybody else is talking about whatever they want at work, you have to be able to realize that you're at a disadvantage and why you're at a disadvantage. And you have to realize that by not oh, what's the word I'm looking for? by not entertaining them somehow, especially if you're not social like me. Um, I'm not antisocial, but I'm introverted. I'm really introverted. That tries to pretend like he's extroverted when he's not. It's super drains my energy, but like I've realized more and more just in like the last 2 weeks. A, how little of work everyone's actually doing. B, the work that's produced, how little of it is actually the person that's actually producing said work and not somebody else that's ghost working for them. And C, how much gossiping everybody's doing. And I had somebody tell me, like, if you're not willing to share some gossip with me, I will no longer essentially tell you what's going on around the office. And part of that is because they won't trust you if you don't give them something. But like, here's the reality, and I told my boss this, like, I should be able to be trusted because they realize that I am not gossiping about anybody else to them. I am a listener. And one of the people I told that to, they immediately shut up. That was a huge red flag to them that I was not willing to gossip because it means they can't trust me, which again is antithetical to how trust should work. They don't want me to tell anybody what they're telling me, but they want me to tell them what somebody else shared in confidence. This is how the left's brain works. It's trust through mutually assured destruction while wanting everybody else to be as either mentally or physically disarmed as possible, while they remain with as many cards as possible instead of just respecting everybody's space and boundaries. And they're worried about offending everybody. And I get it. Like, if you're dealing with a bunch of like people who've already carved out their territory, you want to read the room. Totally get that. But that doesn't mean that you back down. You read the room and then you proceed anyway. But at least you know what you're getting into. Like, I don't need to ask permission. Nothing gets done. You read the room, you do what you're going to do anyway, maybe modify it a little bit if you have to, and then you get it done. Like, that is how our generation works. And unfortunately, the lefty-loo part of our generation has just turned into total pussies. And it's the same thing with the damn boomers. In my books, I call them the Reagan boomers and the Woodstock boomers. Those are the two boomer factions in my books. And like, that's what it is. You've got these hippy dippy, everything's gonna be fine, man. And then you got these like Reagan boomers that are like, we're gonna do XYZ, even though they're the ones that got us into this mess by just working instead of actually getting involved in the politic body. The Woodstock boomers and the Reagan boomers are both equally responsible for this. And they just don't see it. And then you got these, whatever we are, whatever our side of Gen X is, that's just like, F everything, leave us alone. We gotta just deal with the pussy Gen Xers that think they're gonna get by being not offensive, when I think in the end of the day, they know they have to come across the aisle and deal with us because we're the only people getting shit done. And they know that. They just don't they don't want to do it our way, but they know deep down it has to be done our way, but they're trying to help us navigate and do their best so we don't just move on without them. And then the Zoomers, or whatever the fuck they're called, most of them are just completely just nihilistic now. I'd say probably like if the millennials, so if the Gen Xers were like 30 to 40% screwed and the millennials were like 60 to 70% screwed, I'd say the Zoomers were like 90% screwed, and they know it. And that's been a really interesting. It's been a really interesting dichotomy. So I think if you're a good listener, but you're based and can tweak things a little bit, I think you can still make a lot of stuff happen. But it's going to get harder and harder because unemployment is going to be insane. And I was able to recognize, again, and not overinflate my own ego, that I would not be that great at getting a new job. I would have challenges in getting a new job too, just like I did the last time there was a big crash. And so I'm being humbled by that again, and got my first humiliating letter that I lacked. Because I'm looking around for other stuff. You'd be stupid not to. Got my first humiliating letter that I don't lack the expertise to do my own job. But I've got a 15-year-old resume. I've got a resume that used to work really good 15 years ago, that used to work okay 10 years ago, and that used to work a little bit 6 or 7 years ago. My resume does not work anymore. And so my point is I do have to be a little flexible. I do have to be able to listen. So I'm going to leave you all with that. And thank you for listening to my stream of consciousness. I hope this audio turns out okay. Buy my books. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.